I never thought my own flesh and blood would be the person to sign my death warrant while smiling and telling me she loved me. There I was, sitting in my favorite armchair, expecting a late birthday gift or maybe news of a promotion, when my daughter Lily handed me a thick, cream-colored envelope with the most radiant, excited expression I'd ever seen on her face. She leaned in, whispered, "I have a big surprise for you, Dad," and watched me with bated breath as I tore the seal. I expected a cruise ticket or maybe a framed photo of us, but instead, I pulled out a stack of legal documents and a final notice for a private business loan totaling exactly $400,000. All of it taken out in my name, with my forged signature staring back at me from every single page. My heart didn't just drop. It felt like it stopped beating entirely. I looked up at her, my hands shaking so hard the paper rattled, and she just giggled and said, "Surprise! We're business partners now. I need to know right now, before I tell you how deep this betrayal went. Would you be able to look your own child in the eye after they effectively stole your entire future? Or would you burn everything down to save yourself? Tell me, was I wrong for what I did next?" To understand how a father gets to the point of considering a police report against his only child, you have to understand who Lily was to me. After my wife passed away 10 years ago, Lily was my entire world. I worked 2 jobs to put her through a top-tier university, and when she wanted to move to the city to pursue her dreams of being a high-end fashion consultant, I dipped into my savings to pay her rent for the first year. I thought I was being a supportive father, but looking back, I was just building a pedestal for a monster. Lily always had a taste for the finer things: designer bags, expensive dinners, and a social circle that looked like a page out of a luxury magazine. Every time she came home for a weekend, she looked more like a stranger, draped in labels I couldn't pronounce and talking about people who lived in a reality I could never afford. I lived a quiet life in the suburbs, planning for a modest retirement in 3 years. I had a neat little nest egg, a house that was finally paid off, and a sense of peace. That peace shattered the moment I read the fine print of that surprise. As I sat there in silence, Lily started rambling about a revolutionary, luxury boutique she had opened 6 months ago. She explained with terrifying nonchalance that she needed seed money and knew I'd say no because I was too traditional. So she just took care of the paperwork herself. She had used my house as collateral. My home, the one her mother and I built together, the place where we recorded Lily's height on the kitchen doorframe for 18 years, was now owned by a high-interest private lending firm. The first twist came when I realized this wasn't just a business loan. As I flipped through the pages, I saw that she hadn't just used my name. She had listed me as the primary guarantor for a lease on a flagship storefront in the most expensive district in the city. The monthly payments were more than my yearly salary. When I finally found my voice and asked her how she could do this, she looked offended. She told me I was being dramatic, and that the boutique would be a unicorn company within a year. But then my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank. My retirement account, the one I'd spent 35 years building, was empty. She had accessed my login credentials, probably while she was helping me set up my new iPad last Christmas, and drained every cent to cover the first few months of operational costs. I felt a cold sweat wash over me. I wasn't just in debt. I was penniless. And the worst part? She had hired her deadbeat boyfriend, Marcus, as the chief financial officer. Marcus was a guy I had banned from my house years ago because I caught him trying to steal my watch during a family barbecue. For the next 2 days, I didn't sleep. I went to the boutique address listed in the papers, expecting to see a bustling business. Instead, I found a half-empty store with Marcus sitting behind a marble desk, scrolling on a gold-plated phone. There were no customers. There was hardly any inventory, just a few overpriced silk scarves and some empty champagne bottles scattered in the corner. When I confronted him, he laughed and told me to relax. "Pops, we're rebranding." That's when the second twist hit me like a freight train. Marcus wasn't just an employee. He was the one who had convinced Lily that they didn't need to work hard if they had access to capital. He had found the private lender, a group that didn't care about credit scores because they knew they could just seize the property. This wasn't a business. It was an elaborate trap designed to liquidate my life for their temporary lifestyle. I realized then that my daughter hadn't just made a mistake. She had been groomed by a con artist to prey on her own father. But Lily wouldn't hear it. When I begged her to come clean and help me go to the authorities to report Marcus, she turned on me with a venom I'd never seen. She called me a dream killer and told me that if I reported the fraud, she would go to jail, and it would be my fault for ruining her life. She used my love for her as a weapon, dared me to call the police, and walked out, leaving me with the bill for her delusions. I stood in that empty store looking at the $2,000 marble desk that was paid for with my blood, sweat, and tears, and felt something inside me snap. The grief for my wife, the years of overtime, the sacrifices. It all came rushing back, and I realized I wasn't looking at my daughter anymore. I was looking at a predator. So that's the situation I was in. My retirement was gone, my house was on the line, and my daughter was the one who pulled the trigger, all while being manipulated by a low-life boyfriend. I had to make a choice. Do I lose everything I've worked for to protect a daughter who didn't care if I ended up homeless? Or do I fight back? Before I tell you the absolute carnage that followed, and the revenge I orchestrated, I want you to pause. Go to the comments right now and tell me. If your child stole $400,000 in your home, would you send them to prison? Or would you suffer in silence to keep them free? I'm reading every single comment, so let me know your thoughts. I decided I wasn't going to be the victim. If Lily wanted to be a high-stakes business mogul, I was going to give her a masterclass in how the world really works. I didn't go to the police, not yet. Instead, I went to a friend of mine, a retired forensic accountant named Arthur, and we started digging. What we found was the third and most sickening twist. Lily and Marcus hadn't just spent the money on the shop. They had diverted nearly $100,000 into a private offshore account in Marcus's name only. He was planning to ditch her the moment the loan defaulted and the house was seized. He was even looking at one-way tickets to Thailand. My daughter was being scammed by the man she was protecting, and she was too blinded by her own greed to see it. Arthur also found evidence that Marcus had been forging Lily's signature on internal documents, essentially setting her up to take the fall for the entire bankruptcy, while he walked away with the cash. I didn't tell her. I wanted her to see the person she chose over me in his truest form. I waited until the grand opening gala they had planned, a party they were throwing using the last of my credit line, filled with hired models and fake investors. I showed up in my best suit, looking every bit the proud, supportive father. Lily was beaming, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my first car, holding a glass of vintage bubbly. Marcus was acting like he owned the city, slapping people on the back and talking about disrupting the market. In the middle of the party, in front of all their influencer friends and potential investors, I stood up to give a toast. I saw Lily's eyes sparkle, thinking I was finally endorsing her vision in front of the people she wanted to impress. I started by saying how much I loved my daughter, and how I would do anything for her. I spoke about her mother, and how proud we were of the girl she used to be. Then my tone shifted. I pulled out a portable projector and said, "But I think everyone here should see the real business model that funded this evening." I projected the bank statements showing Marcus's secret offshore account, the flight itinerary to Bangkok, and the side-by-side comparison of the forged signatures. The room went silent. The music stopped. The influencers stopped filming and just stared. I looked at Marcus and said, "The police are outside, Marcus. And they aren't here for the business loan. They're here because I reported the $100,000 you stole from this company as embezzlement from a joint venture." Marcus tried to run, but I had already blocked the exits with 2 private security guards I'd hired. Lily was frozen, her face turning a ghostly pale as she watched the man she loved immediately start screaming that it was all her idea. He yelled at the top of his lungs that she was the one who told him to forge the papers, that she hated her boring father, and that he was just an innocent bystander in her greed. The final payoff was cold and calculated. I had made a deal with the private lender before the party. I provided them with Arthur's forensic report, which proved the loan was obtained through criminal identity theft. In exchange for the evidence that would allow them to go after Marcus's hidden assets and a smaller, manageable settlement from me, they agreed to release the lien on my house. Marcus was hauled away in handcuffs, sobbing and pointing fingers. Lily wasn't arrested that night, but the social fallout was total. Her friends vanished in seconds, worried their own reputations would be tarnished by the scandal. She was left standing in an empty, expensive room with a father she had betrayed. I didn't hug her. I didn't tell her it was okay. I handed her a suitcase I'd packed with her things, the few things I'd bought her before she became this person, and told her that she had 24 hours to leave the state and find a job. I told her I was filing a civil suit against her to recoup every penny of my retirement fund, and that if she ever stepped foot on my property again, I'd have her arrested for trespassing. She cried. She screamed that I was a monster and that I'd ruined her future, but I just looked at her and said, "No, Lily. I'm just a man who's finally retired, and I don't have room in my life for people who don't exist." The next 6 months were a blur of court dates and legal battles. I didn't let up. I didn't show mercy. Every time my lawyer asked if I wanted to settle for less, I remembered the shaking in my hands when I first opened that cream-colored envelope. I recovered 60% of my savings, which is enough to live on, but the house feels massive and cold now. It's been a year since that night. Marcus is serving a lengthy sentence for fraud and embezzlement in a state prison. Lily is working a retail job in a different city, living in a cramped apartment, and we haven't spoken since the day she signed over her remaining assets to me in a court-ordered settlement. It breaks my heart every day that I lost my daughter, but I realized that the daughter I loved died the moment she decided my life was worth less than a luxury storefront. I saved my home, and I'm slowly rebuilding my savings, but the silence in my house is the heaviest price I've ever paid. I sometimes sit in that same armchair and look at the kitchen door frame, wondering where the little girl I raised went. This story is a reminder that sometimes, the people we are most willing to take a bullet for are the ones holding the gun. If you think I did the right thing by holding her accountable, like this video. If you think a father should never sue his own child, tell me why in the comments. I want to hear the other side. Subscribe for more stories that prove real life is crazier than any fiction, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess below. I'll see you all in the next story.